Good evening, everyone. I have the absolute and distinct pleasure to welcoming all of you tonight to a very special event of ours, the topic launch of the 51st St. Gallen Symposium. And we're here in a wonderful place in Berlin. Unfortunately, it's a little rainy out, but we're welcomed by one of our dear partners, Finsbury Glover Hering, in one of their new office buildings here in Berlin. The Cube, it's at the heart of German democracy, so to speak, just 2 weeks ahead of the big elections. We have a good view on the Chancellor's building and the Reichstag. Absolutely, first and foremost, our thanks and gratitude goes to Finsbury Glover Hering for offering to graciously host this event for us, this very special event, this topic launch for us, for enabling it. So thank you for all of your support. Maya, Henrik, Katharina, Stephanie, for all your support in making this possible, and also to the Zurich office, of course, the office that we're typically in contact with Finsbury being a part of the St. Gallen or partner of the St. Gallen Symposium. So thank you so much for that, and we're very grateful. Thank you. I'm particularly happy to welcome all of you here in the room today, because it's a sore sight for me to see physical audience members. So I'm really happy to welcome all of you. Thanks so much for taking the time on a busy Wednesday evening to join us here, to being part of the discussion of this year's topic. So thank you so much, and also obviously a very warm welcome to our panels who will be on stage shortly for a panel discussion. Thanks so much for taking your time and for not only participating, but actually contributing to the discussions of this topic ahead. And lastly, and it's still part of this new normal, and I promise I'll only use that term once tonight, a warm welcome to the digital audience, for everyone who dialed in tonight, from wherever they are, from their homes or offices. Good evening, good morning to some of you. It's great that you're part of this, that you're contributing, and that you want to learn more about the St. Gallen Symposium and our new topic. So before we get started with today's panel, I'd like to just go over two things quickly. On the one hand, give you a bit of background about the St. Gallen Symposium, what we stand for, what we do, what it's all about, for some of you who are not as familiar with us. And secondly, the reason why we're all here today, give you some background on this new topic for the 51st iteration of the St. Gallen Symposium. So just to dial back the years a little bit, and I don't want to go too far into detail here, the background of the St. Gallen Symposium, it's a student-driven initiative, and it was founded by students of the University of St. Gallen just about 52 years ago. This was in '69, and this was the time when we saw a lot of sort of student unrest, so people going to the street, demonstrating the establishment, demonstrating against the decisions of some of the senior decision makers. And it was a bunch of students, and particularly one, our founder, Professor Schürer, who decided to choose a path of dialogue instead of confrontation, physical confrontation, that is. And out of that idea, the St. Gallen Symposium emerged, and that's what we've been trying to achieve over the past 50 odd years, to bring together the ideas, the sort of questions of the next generation with senior leaders of this of the current decision maker generations. And we're doing that to chase sort of our overall vision, lead with the next generation in mind, meaning that senior decision makers really consider the consequences of their actions for the next generations. And we do that through year-round events such as this one and others, through publications with research institutions, with practitioner partners, through our content strategy. But it all culminates typically in May every year, when we host the annual St. Gallen Symposium in St. Gallen every year. And that's what we're here to promote, essentially, with this topic launch as well. Lastly, before I get into the topic, I mentioned the St. Gallen Symposium is a student-driven initiative, and it's always important because it's sort of difficult to imagine what we mean by that. It's something that we not only try to enable on the on stages during our program points, but also something that we try to live every day. So as we speak, we have this and the upcoming week about 35 students from the University of St. Gallen incoming as the next cohort to shape the Gallen Symposium for the 51st time. So again, they take off 1 year from their studies voluntarily to support this. And they are really the driving force behind the Gallen Symposium. The energy comes from them, and they make a huge sacrifice, but also gain a lot from that year. So we're always particularly grateful that they go through that rigorous application process. And they're also led by students, and we have one of them here tonight, Niklas. There he is. Niklas was part of the student team last year and is now part of the student leadership team, leading the new cohort of students towards the 51st Gallen Symposium. So be sure to have a drink with him later tonight. But enough looking back. I'd love to now look forwards. What we can expect for the next year of the Gallen Symposium, and this is why we're here. We always have one theme, one topic that guides us, sort of as a guiding star throughout the year. And we've just concluded Trust Matters as a topic for our 50th anniversary in May in St. Gallen, and we're now moving towards our new topic. And this is what we've all been waiting for, you hopefully as well. We're quite happy to announce that the topic of the 51st Gallen Symposium will be collaborative advantage. So moving away from seeking solely competitive advantage towards collaboration and collaborative advantage. And this is something where I also have to hand out a huge thanks to Felix Rüdiger, who's the head of content at the Gallen Symposium. It's his role and responsibility, together with the students, together with our leaders of tomorrow and our knowledge community, to develop these annual themes. And again, thank you, and huge compliments for being, again, sort of ahead of the curve on these topics. Before we start with the panel, just a couple of words on what we mean by collaborative advantage. In principle, it means essentially gaining benefits from doing something together as opposed to doing it by yourself. So as an individual or institution or a country even, gaining benefits from collaborating. But that in no way means, and we're not trying to suggest, that collaboration is always the right key for every issue, certainly not. And it definitely comes, even if it is suitable, with a set of challenges and strings attached to it. And that's, I think, what makes the interesting complexity around that topic. And I'd like to maybe underline that complexity with just one example that might, be quite relatable for all of us. And that's what we've been through the past 1.5, 2 years, which is the global COVID pandemic. And you could certainly, I think, quite intuitively make an argument that in order to overcome such a pandemic that doesn't really care about borders and all of these things, you need collective actions, because there's not really a point in us coming together here in a safe environment and upholding all of these safety standards when there's an event next door or in another country that doesn't do that. And it's not really sufficient that vaccine rates are at a suitable level, maybe not high enough yet in many Western countries, when developing countries aren't quite there yet, or not nearly there yet, and won't be likely for a couple of years. So we need collective actions, and there's certainly an argument to be made for that and for collaboration. If you just view that topic from a slightly different angle and just tiller the light there a little bit, you could quite easily make an argument for almost the exact opposite. You could argue that the pandemic has actually identified that we're quite bad, or that we actually quite deficient in collaborating. We're quite dependent on all of these global supply chains and just-in-time issues. So if we want to tackle strategic issues like a pandemic quickly, we're quite bad at it. Or we're not perfectly equipped for it, let's say. We're highly dependent on other people. And that makes us vulnerable. And you could also argue that constructs like the EU, who would typically be a good example for collaborations between countries across borders, didn't do a good enough job, let's say, at the beginning to actually leverage a collaborative advantage for its citizens in procuring healthcare equipment and vaccines for its citizens. So there's an argument to be made for almost the other side of the coin. But I think that example nicely shows how difficult it is to find that balance between wanting and needing to be independent for some things as individuals, as companies, when it comes to intellectual property or research and development, things like that. You need some degree of independence, but also you need to be interdependent with the world to still, remain competitive within that global environment. So it's certainly a difficult task to find that balance and striking that balance between independence and interdependence. And this is what we want to find out more about within that topic. That's what it's all about for us. We can certainly agree, I think, that many of these challenges, be it a pandemic or the global climate crisis, but also from a cross-generational perspective, the education systems, the welfare state, all of that needs collaboration across borders, across industries, across generations, at least to some significant extent. And we need to find out how we can do that. So that's what the topic is all about for us. And that's why these events are so important for us in these discussions, because we want to learn about these use cases firsthand. What are actually new and working mechanisms of collaborations? Can we identify new ways of doing that, maybe particularly after the pandemic teaching us to do it digitally and virtually? So that's what it's all about, and we're really excited to learn more about it tonight in the specific context of business and the collaboration between corporates and startups. This is what we're here to discuss tonight, but then we're really excited to pass the torch along throughout the year to learn more about it in a more general sense as well. And we brought a little video for you today from St. Gallen. It's our official topic launch video that was released today on the topic of collaborative advantage. And we'd love to share it with you. And afterwards, I'm quite happy to hand over to Stella, our moderator for today, also a University of St. Gallen alumni, so always happy to see her. She's going to be taking us through the rest of the evening, through the panel discussion, and she'll be introducing the panelists shortly then as well. So please enjoy the video of the topic launch of the 51st St. Gallen Symposium, and thank you so much for being with us and joining us for these discussions. So please go ahead and enjoy the video.
Learning für uns ist, dass ein starker internationaler Austausch immer ein Riesenvorteil ist.
The environment is not an issue, but it's the foundation of life. And the climate doesn't have a crisis, but humanity has a crisis.
Basically, to me, it means that a company should succeed only when it helps the world around it succeed.
We make some kind of impact on the planet every single day. And we can choose what sort of impact we make.
Able to give a chance to Mother Nature to regenerate itself. We've got to raise our level of ambition, starting with each one of us.
We accept that we are different, and we begin on that basis.
This is quite a difficult and delicate balance sometimes, because no one is really independent.
We really need to work with the companies together to make this transition, to be open, to let these young people with the crazy minds, with the different ideas and the different opinions and driven by the passion to come in and support to make the transition happen.
Work with us
on cross-generational dialogue
throughout the year and from the 5th to the 6th of May 2022
at the 51st St. Gallen Symposium.
Thank you very much, Gunnar. And as you just said, collaboration and collaborative advantage will, of course, also be our guiding topic here at the panel discussion. And we would like to focus on the cooperation at the intersection between the corporate and the startup world. And I'm very happy to have three amazing panelists here with us today. First of all, Julian Teicke, he's founder and CEO of wefox. And if I'm informed correctly, you just closed your Series C funding round, which puts a total valuation of $3 billion right now. And secondly, I would like to introduce Christine Wang. She is Managing Director at the Lufthansa Innovation Hub, and she's not only an expert for the German market, but also for the Asian market at the intersection between the corporate and the startup world. And last not but, and last but not least, Christian Knörle. He is he is head of company building at Porsche Digital. And together with his team, he founded Forward 31 at the wake of the Corona pandemic, where everyone else was closing down their innovation units. Right. Thank you. And just to prepare you here in Berlin, at the end of our panel, we would invite you to ask some questions. We've reserved some time for a Q&A session and are looking forward to your input and questions. Right, so in the past decade, we have seen more and more startups trying to or pushing towards collaboration with startups in an effort to boost their innovation. And these collaborations can come in different forms and shapes, digital or innovation labs to incubators or accelerators or even corporate venture capital. However, we want to ask here to start a panel with the question, what is actually the underlying motivation for a corporate to invest in some kind of startup unit or in a function that is at this intersection between the corporate and startup world? Because what we have seen is that actually every DAX 30 company, according to a study by the Boston Consulting Group, has at least 3 units aiming at the cooperation with startups. So I don't know, Christine, if you would like to start with this one.
Sure, thank you. So I actually think there are 2 main drivers, to be honest. The first is obviously that you see a lot of new startups coming into your sector, disrupting your business model. And I think part of that is, having innovation hubs, labs, accelerators is just an answer to protecting or finding the next generation business model for that corporate. Now, in our particular case, especially, you've all traveled before, and obviously it's a very fragmented experience. And so obviously, for very obvious reasons, you need to actually collaborate with different people and different companies along that travel chain to really, create value for the end consumer. So that's a second reason for why we're sort of like in the middle, at the intersection between the Lufthansa Group, but then also the wider ecosystem, to really help facilitate, connect, and also to start that dialogue.
Maybe let me put this on a general level, because you said 3 innovation units per DAX 30.
Approximately, yeah.
Approximately. I doubt that number, to be honest. It's by far more. And I think the key reason for that is maybe in the beginning, it's like because it was kind of cool, to be very honest. And that's also why many of them fail, actually, because there's no clear goal, no clear deliverable at the end. And I think corporates and startups is, for me, not a different animal, to be honest. It's a different state of something. And I think when you are corporate, you are on a certain level where you are very mature, you manage your business model, and you're very stable. So your key task is to optimize processes. And if you have people who optimize processes, like we do the best sports car on the planet, then you're pretty good in something because it's repetitive, etc. But on the other hand, creating a startup is a different animal, because you try to find a business model. So that's why you pivot and try out and get. So you need a different mindset and a different skill set. And you lose that over time, to be honest, because you hone and tweak your perfection. So corporate is more, your world is hone the processes to hone the perfection. A startup is more like, it's not about perfection, it's to find the business model. It's a different task. And what many companies actually, I think, missed in the digital transformation is basically, that's why I say state, we also started pivoting until we ended up after a decade, a sports car, great business model. Then you tweak that, but then you suddenly find out, digitalization, how to handle that. And then you go back to state 1, finding the new business model. Then these kind of activities comes into play, basically, how can we find the business model? So you need to have more a startup mindset. And that's basically, I think, all these initiatives come from basically to find ways to innovate, find a new business model in the digital transformation, actually.
And would you say that this is actually something that is working out in collaboration with startups? Or do you think that this is something that gives you value towards reaching that goal? From
first, we should maybe ask the guy from the startup if that works out. I have a theory about that, but maybe Julian, you can jump on that.
So, I mean, back to your question, I think it's much easier to create value, a lot of value. I mean, what we're seeing is the 3 of the 5 most valuable companies in the US weren't around 25 years ago. So it's much easier to create value from scratch, from nothing, than to keep value, right? Because essentially you get into the innovator's dilemma. And something works, you have a positive cash flow, the culture changes, and so forth. So continuously reinventing yourself, continuously disrupting and cannibalizing your own business is something that's not very human. Yeah. And that's the type of behavior that you need to cultivate within an organization to be innovative for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? And I think, Apple is a great example, right? They've been around for quite some time, and they are still extremely innovative. And that's really because it's about cannibalizing their own revenue streams, right? And continuously thinking about, okay, what's the next thing, right? And now the difficulty is, how long will it last? How long will the success of Apple last? So again, I think much easier to create value. We created, valuation of 3 billion of our business. We're 5 years, right? Lufthansa, I don't know how old, but I think the valuation is 4.5 billion, right? So we're almost at the valuation of Lufthansa. And we're just 5 years, right? So it's much easier to get there than to get to 30, 40, 50, 60 years of innovation.
So I read in an interview you said that you're tackling an industry, the insurance industry, a $5.2 trillion industry, and that you actually nailed what it means to disrupt. And now you said keeping this speed and always disrupting yourself, reinventing yourself. How do you think you at wefox, you're trying to do that in the future to keep this up?
We have one major revenue stream, which is we sell insurance products digitally from third-party insurance companies. So first thing was, how do I cannibalize my own business? So what I did is in 2018, I launched my own insurance company, and I have the goal of completely eliminating my most stable revenue source, which is commission revenue. So now I'm already thinking about how can I eliminate my two major revenue sources, so one is 70%, one is 30%, how can I completely eliminate those going forward, right? So the third level of revenues that we're starting is called subscription revenues. And the way we look at it is, so insurance is going to change drastically through the IoT data revolution. So by 2025, each one of us is going to own around 25 devices that are connected to the internet. And insurance is based on data. So what we're working on with our team is essentially using contextual data in order to prevent bad things from happening, right? So before something bad happens, you would be notified based on your sensor data, right? So what does this do to our business? We're going to, if you pay 1,000 euros in premium to us as an insurer for your car insurance, and we reduce your risk by, let's say, 30–40%, which is our goal, we would only charge you 600 or 700. So we would give you a discount, right? So we would cannibalize some of our revenue. And in return, we're going to take part of that revenue as a subscription revenue for delivering you the tech service, right? And we're going to end up at around 800 instead of 1,000, right? So we're going to have less revenues, but we're going to have more valuable revenues because the tech revenue has a higher ARR than the premium. And then I already think about, okay, what's going to cannibalize that type of revenue?
And how do the corporates, is cooperation with startups, to open up to the other ones as well, how in what the process you described now, where does the collaboration between insurance, established corporates in the insurance industry or established players in the aviation industry, how does collaboration, what role does collaboration play? Do you think that this is something that is affecting your daily work? Is it something that has advantages, or would you say right now this hype has waned?
Well, I guess for the travel industry in general, I mean, as I said before, it's a very fragmented market. So obviously everyone needs to collaborate together. Now we actually see our unit, the Lufthansa Innovation Hub, actually sees itself as a partner to the Lufthansa Group. So for example, when we talked about sustainability, we built Compensate in 4 weeks, and it's the offsetting solution for the Lufthansa Group. So there's a collaboration happening there as well. And yet at the same time, we're also connecting the group to other market solutions. And why do we do that? Obviously for cost reasons, for synergies, for just bringing a better experience to the table. And I think also just to develop some topics together that are very fuzzy. For example, air taxi is a good example in that field, where it's not really clear how the air taxi startups want to position themselves, whether they want to just be a manufacturer or also an operator. So those are the discussions to have to really define the boundaries and also the collaborative power behind it.
I would say maybe from experience from startup collaborations, I think we discussed in the video was also a nice outline of collaboration and why do you collaborate. I always use an analogy when we work with startups to explain our people basically how we should work with a startup. And it's maybe a little bit inappropriate, but I compare it with flirting basically. So because it's a relationship. So when you start flirting, and that's maybe also what the problem is, to be honest, because in reality, startup and corporate collaboration, most of the terms, it sucks, to be honest. And the reason is simple, because it's over-promising and under-delivery from both sides. So it's like, hey, startup, yeah, I can do everything. And the corporate says, yeah, we are super fast. And in reality, it's both not the case. So that means basically when you're in the flirting process, you need first really every date counts. You need to react fast. Of course, you need to also be somehow responsive. You need empathy. And basically, you really need to bring each party at eye level. And that's sometimes what really happens, that the corporates come like, I'm here. And the startup says, yeah, I'm down there. And it becomes very unbalanced. And that makes not a good relationship. So is that a new topic? To be very honest, not at all, because a car like a 911 is developed by thousands of suppliers, but these guys have the experience of 100 years and they reach automotive grade, so to say, so a certain quality level. So besides the relationship thing, a second thing comes into play, and that is basically an understanding of the state, what I just mentioned. And corporates have the mindset, which I call snapshot thinking. Because if I would meet you and I say, what's your product? And I say, it's shit, I don't like it. So you're done. You're done for the next 10 years because Julian is doing this, and I don't understand pivoting. And tomorrow, your product is something completely else. And that's what I think in the automotive industry, basically, we have seen with Tesla. We looked at it, it's like, they're exploding the cars, it's not good, blah, blah, blah. But the technology develops, actually. And that's the danger why you need to keep up, basically, and understand it's not a snapshot like today is shit, but tomorrow it's awesome. And the day after, it can kill you, basically. And that's really crucial to understand as a company. Okay, if I meet someone, maybe he's in the reinvention phase, basically, and it will change and evolve pretty fast.
It's interesting. You said that collaboration sometimes can also suck. And actually, there was the study from BCG I mentioned earlier found that from the corporates and startups surveyed, 55% of the startups and 45% of the corporates rated that they are somewhat or very dissatisfied with their relationship. You already named a couple of things with the comparison to flirting, what in the dating process, what can go wrong. But I think it would be interesting to also to hear from you, Julian, and Christina, to hear why does this collaboration sometimes suck? What are the factors that influence where is the divide coming from, or would you say it always works out perfectly in your cases? Julian, you want to start?
No, it doesn't. I mean, like in the beginning of wefox, we basically made a huge mistake, which was we thought it would be an honor to spend an afternoon, 4, 5, sometimes 6-hour meetings with corporates. And we actually thought this would create value. The truth was, this was just a waste of time, right? They thought it's an interesting and fun afternoon, right? We were hoping to get some type of business and partnership. That was never their goal, right? It was just to have a fun afternoon from their boring life, right? And essentially, it was just a lead time that was incredible, really low. And then I just told the entire company, we are not taking any more meetings with any corporates. We had a time at which our office was like a zoo. Yeah. So we had basically corporates just, in like 30, 40 people just walk through the office because they wanted to see this. Yeah. And they looked at the employees and were like, oh, a screen. Wow. Okay. So I just said, okay, it's over, and we're not going to do longer meetings than 30 minutes. That's it with corporates. So no, it didn't work. I mean, it was a complete clash of cultures and no delivery.
So, and you would say that, or would you say that your success or wefox's success stems from your independence from corporates, or would you say that no, on the other hand, it got you also where you are right now, the exchanges with corporates or the partnerships, if there are any?
I think the partnership with or the lack of partnership with corporates is what got us there. I think it's especially in insurance. So your industries are very different, but in insurance, it's essentially and so there's so many startups that have died because they were promised stuff by corporates that were never delivered. And in insurance, many people think in terms of optimizing the value chain just a little bit. I make the claims a little bit better. I make the underwriting just a little bit better. And then they only have corporates as customers. And then the corporates promise them the world, and they go into these innovation units. The innovation units, typically my experience in insurance companies, have no power, and they never even think about putting the innovation project into the core business. That never happens, right? So you're stuck with this innovation unit, and essentially you work your ass off, and you lose money, and the project never works, and you die.
Okay.
It's the safest bet to have a startup killed.
Christina, you actually have the experience from both, working with corporates and also from the startup world. Would you agree with Julian, or?
I wanna actually draw on a different perspective. I actually think, and I would agree, obviously we talk about different timelines, right? Like we talk about a startup in the early phases, especially B2B, once like has a run rate of certain months, right? It's a month-to-month kind of game. And then obviously a corporate has all its policies and all these processes and all these purchasing departments and everything. And that makes it very like slow, obviously. So I think, of course, there's a process part, there's a cultural part where you as a corporate, you probably have to like tender it out. You have a process of like candidates and so forth. So it's a bit of a different cultural mindset, I would say. But I also want to just draw on like a recent trend, which is, now we talk about the DAX 40, we talk about, Delivery Hero, we talk about HelloFresh coming into the DAX, obviously. And to me, it's really fascinating because in my mind, it's like, there's this paradigm scheme of like, what is a corporate, right? Like, we talk about corporate as if every corporate is bad and evil and slow and boring. And we talk about startups to be exciting and great and successful. But I think what I find very interesting is like the fact that now there are these digital natives, these, corporates that have been built within like 9, 10, 11 years, not 50 and 100 years anymore. And I think that might even change how we perceive how these relationships will actually evolve. And another point I want to make is, just drawing from my experience in China and working for Alibaba, I think in that case, the market dynamic is so different. It's actually, if you do not collaborate with these big giants, actually as a startup, you won't have a good path forward just from a cash burn perspective. So just adding some more colors or like layers to this conversation here.
Great, thank you. So I think what we have heard, that we have on the one hand corporates where the culture between corporates and startups is somewhat different, and where maybe also the goals of working together do not always fit together. So when we now take a step forward and think about, okay, how could a structure look like where it actually does work out? I don't know, Christian, if you would maybe explain how you work together with entrepreneurs, how the setup looks like, and what you think can make a partnership successful and valuable for both parties.
Interesting questions. We start not with the structure and the process, we start with the people. Mm-hmm. And exactly for us, trust is the most important currency in that kind of relationship. So for us, it's more crucial to first build the trust with the people, and then we develop the structure and the process fitting to us and the people, basically, which is a different approach, because normally you would say, hey, this is our process, it's 6 months, blah, blah, blah. But if it doesn't make any sense for the business model, you don't need that, to my personal opinion. And we really take extensive time, basically, to meet the people, screen the people. And it's, on the one hand, so people in headquarters ask me, basically, what is the criteria list and the scoring model? And I say, yeah, we have all that. That's true. We have all that. We don't use it really in reality, to be honest, because there's also intuition and this feeling of trust involved. And that is also sometimes what you lose then over time, because suppliers, you rate them with a scoring model. Working with entrepreneurs, it's not a scoring model where I say, I met Julian and the scoring model, 6 level. So basically you develop a feeling, can we work together, basically? Is he able to do the business model? Can we trust him to give him money to build all this thing? So by this, it's really a relationship business we are in and not a transactional one, even though there are transactions involved. And by this, it's not the first thought, which is very corporate, to be honest. It's like, let's define the rules and the structures and processes. So that's not the first thing, it's really the people where we start from.
Interesting. And when, Julian, if you would put yourself into the perspective where you would want to work together with a corporate, what would be, from a startup perspective, your needs that you would want towards this partnership? What would help you flourish and grow?
I mean, it depends, right? It depends. Like we're working with a lot of corporates, and we do business, right? Traditional business, and that works smooth, right? So we're talking about innovation, and I think as a corporate, the only way to really do this reinvention, right, and I look at insurance mainly here, right? Is what you have to do is you have to be able to build a speedboat next to your big ship, right? And that speedboat, you need to give all of the freedom, right? And I think one of the really important criteria is equity and ownership, right? What I realized a lot with corporates was they were starting ventures, not giving the people that drove it equity, A, and B, gave them a very secure way back. Yeah. If it fails, your position is waiting, right? So that's not going to work. You're going to have people that go all in, and then they need to have all of the freedom, and they have to have the goal of I build Allianz 2.0, right? And then they need to be supported by all of the people on the big boat. So they need to be cheering, not be in competition, but be cheering to all of the people on the speedboat, be like, you're going to pass by us, and we love it, go, go, go. That's a huge cultural challenge, right? And then you're going to have to, at the point where the speedboat passes by the big boat, you're going to have to convince everyone to jump ship. And that's, at the cultural piece is the most difficult, right? So I don't think that the innovation will come from outside. I don't know any of those cases. It needs to come from inside, yeah? And you need to be able to hire really great entrepreneurial people and give them a big ass mission of replacing us, please.
Okay, so Christina, she just said he would give the startups equity, complete freedom to actually go with the speedboat. You said in an interview that for a startup from a corporate to actually grow and flourish, there need to be like structures which fit the startup, which are not corporate structures, but where the startup can actually grow. How do you think, from your perspective, hearing what they said, equity, freedom, do you think that this would work, or how do you think a perfect, we don't call it structure, but a setup, maybe a way of working together, how would that look like from your experience?
I would totally agree, actually. I think, equity and actually setting up the startup in a way that actually can survive in the market, in the wild market, is the way to go. And I also don't believe that every corporate needs to build all the different solutions and do venture building in that sense. I think it makes sense where, to your analogy around or your comparison with the speedboat, where you actually really give corporate assets and you really give those startups an advantage. I think that's where it makes a lot of sense to either do it yourself or in a way where you have an acceleration or an incubation kind of like setup, and you really like nurture and support founders. I think that would be the perfect kind of environment where it can work, where you have a bit of a symbiosis between founders or entrepreneurs and a corporate backing, so to speak.
And what does the corporate get out of this partnership in the end? Is it new ventures that would fit along the business model, or what's the benefit for the corporate to invest time, money?
So I think in general, when you think about an innovation kind of unit, I think that's the question that never gets asked enough. What is actually the goal at the end of the day? And it really depends on like what your scope is of that innovation unit. Is it about kind of improving your current business? Then obviously you kind of measure it according to, I don't know, your top line, your customers, etc. Is it about, really completely starting a new segment or a new business model or unit? Then perhaps you would go into VC a little bit more, and it's really about equity and financial value. It's about like really strategic value here. So it really depends on like what is the ultimate goal of this innovation unit, I would say.
Great. And just before, I have one final question, and then I would like to open up for our Q&A session and invite you here in Berlin to ask your questions. When we now think about what we've talked about of ways of corporates and startups working together, when we think about the overarching topic, collaborative advantage of the St. Gallen Symposium, and that we know we live in a world where collaboration is actually not always favored. What would you take away, Christian, from cooperation between corporates and startups that could be applied to the overarching theme of collaborative advantage?
Before I do that, I quickly want to jump on what Christine and Julian basically said. I think if you were in a corporate, I would a little bit disagree that you always need a speedboat in innovation units, because I think many of these units that are out there here in Berlin, they take their existence for granted. And you just said in the beginning, we started in the wake of the pandemic. Actually, I see myself, my mission is fulfilled when we shut down my department. And that's a very unusual corporate thinking, because normally it's like, let's get more people, more budget, and let's make it bigger, etc. But that's one thing, and that's a mindset thing. And by this, I think really collaboration is for me a mindset and not about structures, processes, because it's the same with bureaucracy, actually. You can have the smartest, smoothest process, actually. If there's someone sitting there who has a bureaucratic mindset, it takes for eternity. So that's really, really, I think, really the most crucial part to make these collaborations work. And that's what I have experienced so far with every corporate where it worked out successfully, is you have someone who has the right mindset. And I think it's more like bring that mindset into the large corporates. And the second part, then I hand over. It's also, I think we should change our maybe a little bit German mindset in that discussion as well, because we Germans like to discuss everything. And of course, if you enter the room, normally with innovative stuff, they don't like it. That's pretty German. It's like, yeah, why? And we need to discuss it, blah, blah, blah. And then the guy who presented something is basically pissed off, sorry for that, why it was discussed, they didn't like it. I see it exactly the other way around. So when I go to my people and they don't like it, say, we have been really disruptive. If I enter the room and say, oh, we all liked it, I know, shit, that was really boring what I presented. And that's how you should basically see innovation. And I think we need to have more courage, especially in Europe. So we also highlighted, I think, the EU, and we are the continent of enlightenment and of courage. That is what we have been. And I think we need to bring that back actually in the boardrooms, into the meetings, whatever we do to push innovation in Europe forward, actually.
Great. So I think you said, I think this can also be applied then for the overarching theme, is that you have to have the right mindset for collaboration in order to work. Julian, when you think about putting your learnings to the overarching topic from your experience, what would you say?
So I wouldn't even use these categories of corporate or startup, as you said before. I think it's humans interacting with each other, and I think the main lesson is a different type of human collaboration and interaction, where it's really around, I understand your perspective, you understand my perspective. Let's look at what we can do together in order to create value for you and for me, and try to get a synergy and value out of every single human interaction, whether that's internally inside the company or externally with a partner or with a corporate or whoever you might be dealing with. So not thinking about how can I increase the size of my garden by pushing away other people. That's the old way of thinking. But by using every single interaction you have with a human being for potential synergy creation.
So dialogue, synergies, mindset. Christina.
Actually, I want to go back to this Apple example because it always gets raised and there's always like this idea around like startups creating innovation. But actually, when I think about the iPhone and that really being an infrastructural shift, Apple at that time was already a corporate, right? And I think what it tells me is like, you know, even corporates can innovate, right? But you have to have the right mindset. So actually what really resonated with me when I watched the video was this whole notion around independence, interdependence. And I think it's always been this holy grail of cracking like as a corporate, how can you be like a startup? As a startup, how can you have so much money like a corporate and do something? Or not even just capital. I mean, right now there's too much capital in the market anyways, but having the patents and knowledge and etc. Right? And actually, I think, you know, at least in our unit, we're trying to have that kind of like interplay where we say, hey, we're very independent. We look at air taxis, we look at completely different adjacencies like hybrid work, like, you know, virtual conferencing, all these different things that actually have nothing to do with aviation per se, but do have an influence. And at the same time, we're trying to really leverage like these assets. So really being interdependent and collaborative with the group. And I mean, we still exist after 7 years, I would say. So I feel very confident that, you know, that's something that seems to be a good way forward. And that really resonated with me, that kind of like interplay between independence and interdependence.
Great. Thank you so much already from my side. And I think now we would be ready for questions from the audience. Two of my colleagues, they will walk around with 2 microphones, and you can just indicate by maybe a small hand sign that you would want to ask a questions, and then we'll make sure that that you will get the microphone. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Wolfgang. I work as a chief evangelist for entail. We are Germany's and perhaps Europe's most successful solar energy startup. But my question is directed to another topic. Maybe you've heard of the Federal Agency for Leap Innovation. They do struggle because the chancellor asked them to do innovation, and now they say we can't. Then there's a cyber agency that didn't manage to spend even a single euro. So they just don't succeed. On the other hand, though, there is the Cyber Innovation Hub of the German Armed Forces, and they are quite successful at what they are doing, at least much better than the other 2 ones. So what is your advice to those governmental bodies, or is there any sort of secret source for innovation in the public sector?
You would want to, Christian?
So we actually talked to the colleagues. I think when you talk to them, I think it's not that they don't get it. They have handcuffs, in my opinion. Because we said, okay, what kind of technologies do we have? We can't talk about it. It's like, okay, this is not really a way how to discuss that. And they have super disruptive technologies, but I think the government misses a point. It's if you compare that with China, it's I think the crucial part is not to find a disruptive technology. That's German engineering thinking, like, oh, I invented something, I have the patent. Meanwhile, in China, it's scaled big time already. So what the government basically, I think, misses is a little bit in that discussion is success happens in the market and not in a lab, actually. And it doesn't matter if we are the very first ones on the planet to find the technology. If, to be honest, now I get a little bit cheesy, but Ferdinand Porsche invented the very first electric car, but we didn't scale it. And that happened actually 90 years later. So sometimes you need to have the right timing for technology, but the market success is really to scale it. And that is a setup currently not given in that kind of situation they have. But therefore, I think they also need to let go. That's also what we discussed here. You need to let go a little bit and not overstructure and processes. And then there's someone from the government who decides all that stuff. And that's why they struggle, in my opinion.
I mean, just anecdotal. So we talked about the difficulties of corporate culture innovating. I mean, politics is a whole different, like government is a whole different ball game. Like it's, when COVID started, I had a call with a friend and we said we have to do something, right? And then we said, okay, we're gonna get together all of the big, German startups. And we called, all of the CEOs from HelloFresh, Delivery Hero, and Tier, and I don't know. And we got together like the 30, 40, biggest startups in Germany. And we said, we're going to help the government now. That was last year. And then we said, okay, we're going to help you build a COVID tracing app. We think, technology can make a difference. And then we were like all bullish, and we were like, oh, you know, we're gonna have to get to 50 million downloads, and we're gonna get it, and we're gonna, you know, give you resources. We have the best people, we have the best engineers, right? And they're just, you know, they don't have a lot of work to do right now, right? So and we're gonna just give them to you, like, we're not charging nothing, like, we're just, you know, 50 million, we're gonna make it, right? So we get invited, like, you know, to the ministries and stuff, and the first thing they tell us is, never ever say 50 million as a goal again. We're gonna just look like idiots if we don't reach it, right? And that's just the opposite of how we think as startups, right? It's really about like being extremely bullish and out there, and that's what the government is about. Is just cover my ass, cover my ass, cover my ass. Untersuchungsausschuss. Oh, right? If I don't fail, I'm successful. And I mean, so answer to your question. No chance. Again, you know, find innovative partners and fully trust them as a government, right? Don't even try it. And,
Thank you. A second question. Yeah, please.
Hello. When I think of or read collaborative advantage, I think of Europe. And my question is this a goal of your startups to collaborate with European startups and to use the strength and the creativity of the whole of Europe and the people there?
Sorry, I didn't fully get the question. Whether European startups also collaborate with each other?
Yeah, if that's a goal, is that's an aim of a German startup, or to find collaborations with other European startups. Yeah, because it's just a question. When I think of collaborative advantage, I think of Europe, not only of Germany. Yeah, because that's too small. I think we have to think bigger, European.
Yeah, maybe I can jump on that. So it's actually a topic I was thinking for the last 6 months, actually, because we have a case that is still in stealth, and it's actually, we talked to the European Commission, several European institutions, etc. And what I grasped after some time is a little bit in your direction, but I put it in a more positive way. Like I said, Europe is the continent of enlightenment, and I think we had huge strength in the past. Right now, we are almost irrelevant in comparison with US and China, let's face it. And I have to say, actually, if you read the papers of the European Commission and the EU, it's not stupid what they write down, but they lack the executional part, basically. So things like the Green Deal, to be honest, is like the biggest plan. It's bigger by far than the Marshall Plan. And also it's like the master plan, actually, to get us back in a competitive landscape. So now, are these governments able, in my personal opinion, to make it happen? After I also talked to these institutions, like, yeah, we all support it, blah, blah, blah. There's too much talking and not much execution. And that is, to be honest, then I follow more the spirit of Kennedy than say, what can you do for Europe? And don't ask what the government can do, because they have handcuffs as well, in my opinion. So I think it's a good direction, but the industry, and I think we can basically help to make these kind of things happen. So I don't wait for anyone. It's more like bring the pace on the road. And that's what we can actually do. So actually what you're saying, we're looking into topics, especially in the field of sustainability, that are on the charter basically of the Green Deal, where you can you need to build a business model. It needs to be feasible as a business. And still your market is the world. It cannot be Europe alone, because it's also too small, to be honest. But you can basically ride on the wave of topics that the European Union has set, and also create new competitors, actually. And I think you're also involved in the tech scale-up initiative of Emmanuel Macron, who really also enforces we need to have tech players in Europe. And we have a brain drain, and actually we can reverse that with a couple of things, because there also sometimes regulations are uncool, right? The GDPR is uncool, but there are also things like supply chain impacts and these kind of things for circular economy, where there are regulations and there's a market developing out of that, out of regulations, which is pretty unique. If you talk to US guys, they don't get it. So someone needs to create solutions for that. And who else should do that if not us here, as we sit and create these kind of solutions for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in Europe, and I think Europe will be the epicenter of technological innovation in the next 20 years. I really believe that. I mean, we look at China, they're kind of destroying themselves right now. We look at the US, right?
I think this is a completely different debate.
We look at the US. I have Chinese entrepreneurs come to Berlin and just say, you know, Berlin is the place. You know, we're coming over here. So the US, you know, they're getting into the innovator's dilemma. And I was invited by Emmanuel Macron just a couple of months ago to the Élysée Palace. And I think, you know, yes, we do need, you know, a European spirit. And I think he does it well, right? By essentially thinking about what is the USP of Europe, right? And we need more of that in politics, but I agree with you, we also need to push it ourselves. And imagine if we're able to essentially hire the talent from all around the world and get them to Europe and have them work anywhere in Europe for a company anywhere. That's a huge competitive advantage to any place in the world. If we in Europe place diversity as one of our core values in terms of building innovations, because diversity creates value. If we're able to really, that's very different to how the Silicon Valley was built. I think we can have a huge USP. If we put data ethics at the core of our innovation culture here, I think we can have a huge advantage, right? So I'm a huge believer in Europe. I think it will be the epicenter, and it needs collaboration in order to achieve that goal.
Just for example, Poland has so many cool startups. Yeah? If you've never been there, you don't believe it. Yeah, and that's only an example for what's happening in East Europe. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think time-wise, we have maybe time for one, maybe two more questions if we're quick. Yes, please.
Perhaps a quick question to each of you. Think about an example, a best practice which springs to your mind for such a kind of collaboration between startups and corporates, which could be scaled in the future. I think that would be perhaps interesting to see what we can all contribute.
I have two that jump to mind, and one is more an accident, I think, which is Naspers or no Proseus bought a stake in Tencent, and the stake in Tencent was incredibly more valuable than their entire business. And then another one, I think it's a great example. It's Otto, you know, built About You, right? And About You is went public and is becoming an incredibly valuable asset for Otto. So I really think that these are great examples of investing into businesses and actually these businesses becoming the most valuable assets if you just let them go and deliver or develop themselves.
Please.
So actually, I don't like these, or I also don't have an idol, and I don't like examples as best practices, because what happens in the corporates is like, oh, let's do the Spotify model and organize the stuff, and it doesn't work because you can't simply copy these kind of things. And to be honest, by this, I have more the perspective, let us build the best practice and example in future. That's the task we have, instead of looking into the past where something went great.
Okay, I will contribute to this discussion. I think just to revert back to the discussion beforehand, when I think about Europe, and I get to the point of scaling, I think we're sort of like putting, you know, roadblocks ourselves into our way, to be very honest. I think, you know, I lived in Asia for the last 6 years. I just got back in January, and every time is a bit of a reverse culture shock, because I go to the bakery and I have to pay with cash, right? And then the question is like, why is it that way, right? And I think it's because I think in Europe, because Europe has such a rich history, you're very much bound by your own patterns, traditions, etc., that somehow also prevents you from like going further or innovating or, you know, being one union, so to speak, right? I think those are some of the elements. And to your point on scaling and kind of like collaboration, I think it really starts with the mindset of opening up, of you know, kind of letting go of status quos, of things that we actually very unconsciously do and take for granted. And I think one way, and I guess that's also why I'm in the aviation industry, is because I think, you know, being able to travel to other places and see how other places do it, that's where you really like get a mirror and you can like see how you actually act and how you kind of like react based on your social identity. And I say that because actually I've lived in the US for 3 years. So I've seen Silicon Valley, I've seen like that kind of like dynamic and vibe. And I've lived in China and I've seen the innovation scene over there. I lived in Singapore, and it's really interesting because I feel like all these different regions on that maturity curve, they're at very different stages. And I think Europe is somewhere in the middle, and to really accelerate, yeah, I think we need to like reduce some of these barriers, GDPR, policies, etc., to really get that scale up.
I want to give a bit of a different thesis here. Because I think it's a good example. So I think Germany in the level, or Europe in the level of maturity, is very far behind Asia and very far behind the US, right? And your example with the cash is a great example, right? My explanation though is a bit different, and I think we can turn a weakness into a strength. So for me, the reason for why people are using cash in Germany and the places around Germany is because we have seen two horror regimes, right, in recent history, where essentially an individual was not able to talk to their neighbor without being sure that he's going to tell the secret police about it and him going to jail, right? So the consciousness about data ethics and data security in Germany and Europe is significantly higher because of these historical events than in Asia or in the US. What is the biggest challenge that we face for the next 20 years? It is ethical usage of data. Both the Asia and the US success stories are based on the unregulated use of data, and we're seeing the problems. So who's going to solve these problems? Us.
And I think with this bold statement, we have to close it down, unfortunately. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. And also for all those who attended virtually, thank you for bearing with us. And all those here in Berlin, we would like to invite you to stay on for some drinks and to continue this discussion. And yeah, thank you everyone. Have a nice evening.